Well, we keep getting deeper and deeper into November, which means I check the weather forecast for the mountains even more than once a day. It's like twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. And this week I was rewarded with some good news because 2 to 3 feet of new snow over the Cascade Passes at Hoodoo Ski Bowl, which is where I've been skiing for 50 plus years. Ski resorts will be open soon, ski season. That's a good thing. Fingers crossed that the snow stays there for a while and doesn't melt halfway through the month. Hey, this is Tim Patterson. This is Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. Find me online at tradeshowguy.net, which is kind of a jumping off point to our company website, tradeshowguyexhibits.com, a couple of trade show marketing book websites, some freebie downloads, embedded versions of new video blogs and podcasts, and more. So that's it at tradeshowguy.net. And I'm curious, where are you listening? The audio version is posted on SoundCloud, and you can find the audio version on Apple Podcasts. And the video version always posted on YouTube. The channel is called Trade Show Marketing. Anyway, there's other stuff there besides just the podcast. This week I connected with Stephanie Selesnick of International Trade Information, which, as the name might suggest, works with companies that exhibit internationally, as well as working with international companies coming into the U.S. to exhibit. There's a lot of interesting differences and barriers and things like that. And I thought, that might be a good conversation to have, especially with the pandemic still raging around the world in most places, not in some other places. And yes, we had a pretty interesting conversation. Hope you like it. I want to welcome Stephanie Selesnick to Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. Stephanie, I really appreciate you taking some time and joining me. Thank you.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for asking.
First thing I noticed is a picture of the Beatles behind you.
Yes, it's the Beatles, but it's the Day of the Dead Beatles. I have a pretty extensive.
That's why it looks something a little different there. I can't see it from this distance.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah. I have a pretty extensive Day of the Dead collection that rivals some museums, actually.
That's another conversation at some point. Then I hope we get to have
all the things I picked up throughout the world.
Right, exactly. That's what we're going to talk about, is around the world with trade shows. The company's International Trade Show Information, internationaltradeinformation.com. And I'm curious to learn more about what that company is, first of all. So just tell me kind of like your 60-second version or less, I guess, more.
So I'm second generation in the business. My mom started the company way back when and did her first trade shows. She had a publication and figured her competitor was doing a trade show. This was back in the 1970s. She would do her own, because if he could do it, she could do it. It couldn't be that hard. And then she branched into Mexico, fell in love with Mexico, and started doing shows there. And the rest is kind of history. She decided to retire after the Great Recession. I moved to Las Vegas. And so what I really do is I help internationalize trade shows. So I help bring in exhibitors and visitors, or I take entire expos offshore.
Wow.
Yeah. So I get
There's got to be a lot of moving parts to that. And especially with, foreign languages, different customs, all of that stuff. But, I'm sure that as years go by, you kind of learn the lay of the land, as it were. I'm curious, when you compare, protocols and practices, what stands out as kind of the hardest thing for American exhibitors to learn when they go to another country?
Well, no drayage, no unions. It's also the hardest thing to teach exhibitors when they come here. Drayage. Nobody understands drayage in the rest of the world. It's an impossible thing. And hopefully, as a result of COVID, it will go away, because it's just, I'm really not a fan of drayage. But that's one of the biggest things. The other things is that there are no display guidelines and regulations. There's no pipe and drape. So everything is hard wall, which is a lot prettier.
Right.
And in fact, your freight is brought in from your freight forwarders and customs brokers. So generally, they're the people bringing in the freight, which is kind of interesting and different. The other thing is that alcohol and food is served in booths as normal. It's just part of what it is. So most of the rules and regulations we have here, including the IAEE display guidelines, don't exist.
Just don't exist.
They don't exist.
No.
So when exhibitors come here, they don't understand why we have all these stupid rules. And to be honest with you, I agree most of the time. They just don't understand why. If it's not safety and security or being fair in terms of sound, they don't understand why we have all these crazy rules.
I remember seeing, it's been years, a photo, and I think it was in China, of a show was over, and they had all these exhibits that had just been trashed. And that seemed to be, from what I was reading, kind of a normal thing. If it's a cheap exhibit, you just trash it. Is that uncommon, or is that common? I'm just curious. It was an odd thing that just kind of came to mind.
It was really common. I happen to represent the Shanghai New International Expo Center, which is it's the only Western run and owned venue in China. And it's in Shanghai. It's a 3 million square foot facility,
Right.
including the outdoors. So after some shows, you would see garbage like you've never seen in your life. But because the Chinese government has gotten into sustainability, we're seeing a lot less of the garbage. There's still garbage, but it's a lot less because it's a government mandate to start being sustainable.
Right.
Which is good news for everybody.
Well, I think it is. Yeah. And I remember hearing about that as well. So I was curious how that has affected it. So what's the biggest challenge, I guess, for an American exhibitor who's going overseas, let's say to Europe for the first time, got a big exhibit in Frankfurt or somewhere? What kind of things do you have to walk them through other than what you just talked about? There's no drayage and very few guidelines.
Yeah, generally the first time they go over, they don't have a big booth. They'll go as part of a pavilion. A lot of them will go as a pavilion to learn the way. Number one, don't expect everybody. You're going to another language. You're going to another country to learn, right? To sell. So you should have someone who can speak the language. You may not, and English is still definitely the language of business. But you're in another country trying to sell your product, so you need to have someone who can communicate. And if you're not bringing somebody over, that's fine because everybody can go back and forth in writing, on emails in English. But getting a student or getting a translator is key. Secondly, think about how you're going to present it. What is your pitch? What problems are you solving? And obviously take advantage of the pre-promotion. A lot of times you can actually do that with the GDPR. Things are changing all the time, but take advantage of whatever pre-promotion you can, especially if it's free, because it's crazy not to.
Right. Well, I'm curious also about, the COVID pandemic has changed things around the world in different places, different parts. It's not changed as much. America, obviously, there's hardly any shows going on at all. Some are trying smaller shows, but what's the sense of what's going on around the world that you get these days?
Well, China's back in business. They've been back in business since June. Of course, they've got a totalitarian regime. So for them to tell everybody in a city, you're going to get tested in the next week when cases are popping up, that's what happens. They'll test 60 million, they'll test 60 million people. They'll test millions and millions of people in a very short amount of time. Our shows, so our venue's been back open since June. We've had over 45 shows at this point, over 2 million 2 million visitors. Safety protocols are normal there. Everybody's used to going through a machine, oh God, I just spaced on what they're called. Like when you're at the airport, the scanners, whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
They're scanning for something.
So now there's also a component in those machines that scans for temperatures. Everybody there uses WeChat, and there's an app that does the tracking and so on and so forth. So if you have a green light, you can come in. If you have red, you need to go quarantine, and if you have orange, you need to go to get tested. So they're on that, or yellow, you have to get tested.
So it's like contact tracing type of stuff, it sounds like.
Yep, and it allows you on the metro, taxis, Ubers, whatever. So yeah, into restaurants. The other thing is that besides that, everybody's got to wear a mask. There, it's not a big deal. It's not political. I think after SARS, it's just a normal thing. If you're not feeling well, you wear a mask to keep others from getting sick.
Right.
It's not a political statement.
Right. The technology component that you mentioned is fascinating to me. Everyone's got, and I know that the new Apple iOS 14 or whatever I updated, and you could turn on notifications, that type of thing. It doesn't actually work in Oregon because Oregon, for whatever reason, it
doesn't work in Nevada either. Right. But we do have actually in Nevada, they just launched an app, a COVID-19 app for contact tracing. It's completely opt-in, but it will let you know if you've been exposed, if other people have the app as well.
Come into contact with someone else. Interesting.
Which is smart.
And that, of course, unfortunately, has gotten political, and I don't really want to go down that road, but I think the technology is a fascinating part of that, especially when you tell the story about how it's just part of the lay of the land.
It's part of the lay of the land. You don't have any arguments about wearing masks. You don't have any of those things. People comply. However, we do limit how many people are in each hall at any one time, so there are some of those guidelines, but no one-way aisles, which, by the way, if we can't do them in the supermarket, they're not going to work here, really.
Yeah. So Europe, you talked about China. What's the situation currently in Europe?
Europe, Germany's had a few shows, but now everybody's back on lockdown right now as we speak on, November 10th. Everybody's on lockdown through the end of the month. and maybe through the rest of the holiday season, to be honest with you, because of the increase in COVID. So Germany, Dusseldorf has taken a big, has gone kind of taken the lead in doing their shows. I think they've got outside space. So they just did a big caravan show. And in Europe, caravans are actually RVs. So it was a huge RV show. Yeah.
So the RV pulls up when you walk in,
well, they have them stretched for acres.
Right.
So,
but that's where the exhibit of the company is held, huh? Oh.
Which is normal actually for that industry. They do the same thing here in the US. They're outside spaces with some inside. So that's gone well. But Italy tried doing a few, but again, everybody's gone back on lockdown. Right. So I don't think we're going to see any real shows until maybe, some small shows here and there, but I don't think until first quarter. But we will see them in first quarter.
What about other continents, Africa, South America?
Africa is still battling. I know that Singapore is looking to start doing some shows soon, and they're also trying to create a bubble. Pardon me. They're trying to create a bubble with Hong Kong and Malaysia and Thailand. So they're all trying to create a little bubble for themselves, because Singapore is an island. I mean, it's a city state. Literally, it's a city state. Mm-hmm. Great place to do business. Great place to visit. Really long airplane flights to get there. But wow, it's an incredible place. Malaysia is right next door, and they've done pretty well as well on the lockdowns. Vietnam is doing shows because they only had like 300 cases. But in each of these cases, they closed their borders and they did testing. So all of the smaller countries now that have been, huge hubs like Thailand for trade shows, they're reopening, but they're doing it very slowly, very methodically. They're all looking at having the rapid testing. And again, everybody's waiting on the vaccine.
So when you do work with shows over there, are you working with the organizers, you're working with exhibitors, or just kind of vary from event to event?
I work with both. With both. I recently launched with my partner of mine, Diane Bjorklund, who worked with Trade Show Executive for many years and launched and ran their events for a very long time. We started something called the International Exhibitor Representation Program. And we started it in the US. We figured, okay, well, there's all these people. Equipment supplies are going all over the world. All of that's still going. It's just people aren't, right? So the thought came to us at a show. I was at a show here before everything shut down and realized, oh my gosh, the Chinese exhibitors aren't here. It would be so good if we could have somebody in their booth to be their representatives, not students, not temp staff, like actual professionals, to take over and then send them their leads. And so it went from there. So we have a worldwide network of people, and a lot of them are our trade show folks who have been made redundant, as the Brits say. So they've been fired. I know. How is that? I don't know about
crazy.
That word.
But I'm guessing that saves on travel costs, and hiring someone to work a show for several days is probably less than the cost of bringing someone over. And
by the time you get done with everything, the costs aren't dissimilar. But the thing is that you don't have to worry about your people traveling. You don't have to worry about them going home to their families. Are they going to have to quarantine? Are they going to have to quarantine to get into China, even if they can, which is not limiting a whole lot of people in. So it works going overseas as well as for people coming into the US. And then also, because of the corporate travel bans, it can work in the US, just US company to US company.
I'm also curious, Stephanie, about digital events. I know that here in the States, there's a lot of companies and a lot of shows are doing it, like CES has gone digital and for January, and some other shows are looking at it. And of course, a lot of exhibit makers are trying to transition to making virtual exhibits. How do you see that internationally? Is that a big topic or not?
Oh yeah, everybody's virtual.
Yeah,
everybody's digital. Everybody's sick of it. Some some have found a way to make money. Most it's pennies on the dollar. Right. But I think the average. I saw something on Event Manager blog that said it was like 13 cents on the dollar in terms of the money being made.
Yeah, and I've seen some anecdotes that it was a whole lot more, but you're right. An anecdote is not data.
Very few. There are very few, and those people were already. It really depends on your industry in terms of your success, and of course, everybody and their brother has a platform. I'm sure you've been inundated.
Yes, and not only that, I think that there's obviously a big desire for face to face. People like that. It's you see and you feel and you see body language and all that goes along with the face to face. But virtual it's easy to be distracted by, dog barking or whatever.
Cat climbing on the desk.
Right.
knocking over something, kids screaming.
But,
parents,
I think a lot of people are hoping that virtual becomes a part of live shows when it returns. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
I think hybrid is good.
Yeah.
I think hybrid is good. For people that cannot travel, I think what you can do is you can expand your audience. But then again, you're really running 2 events simultaneously, aren't you? Because you're going to have a different experience for the live versus the people who are digital. And you have to plan journeys. You have to plan the customer journeys for both. But everybody needs to feel like they were at the same event.
Yeah, so it's got to be similar information, similar way to put that out there. Interesting.
So it's kind of a twofer. So, I think that will be the normal going forward. We're not seeing that, of course, in China because everybody can, the people but their shows are down 30 to 50%, depending on how much international they had in terms of exhibitors and visitors. But again, I think it's a good thing. It's the more the merrier, and bringing in new quality and new people into the tent is not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing. Yeah. One last thing. I'm just curious if you have a sense for when, quote unquote, normal will return here in the States. Do you get a sense talking to people and show organizers?
Until we have a national pandemic policy and get this thing under control, we don't.
Yeah.
We really don't. It's the Wild West out there, and it's been that way. My hopes are that the new administration is taking it seriously and they believe in science. And I'm hoping that they work on it. That was the news that one of the, Pfizer may have a 90%. Well, that still leaves 10% of the population, which is still a significant number. You figure what, we have 320 million people. So take 10% of that.
Yeah.
That's still a scary
It's a big battle. I agree. And unfortunately, it's political. Stephanie Selesnick of International Trade Show Information. It's been fun learning
about. It's International Trade Information.
Okay. And how can people find you?
Internationaltradeinformation.com or at Steph, S-T-E-P-H. I'll spell my last name, Selesnick, S-E-L-E-S-N-I-C-K. On all the usual places.
On the usual places. All right. I appreciate your time, Stephanie. Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again to Stephanie Selesnick. Find links to international trade information on the show notes. And before we close for the week, this week's one good thing is Seth Godin's new book, The Practice, Shipping Creative Work. There's a good chance you've heard about it because, well, first of all, it's a Seth Godin book. It's his 20th book. Seth has been around a while. He's sold a lot of business-related books, a couple of bestsellers, maybe more. Second, he's really good at book launches, appearing on podcasts and the media. Of course, he has a very top-rated podcast himself, which he's discussed the book on. So, yeah, I just finished it today. Thought it was great for anyone who is a creative sort who wants to ship creative work. There's a lot of good stuff in there. That wraps it up for this week's Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. I'm Tim Patterson. Thanks. Let's do it again here in another 7 days.